much, Karina. And Khusro, I appreciate what you're doing here too, showing everything, helping me with my slides. So people who are listening will hear me say things like, please start, or move the screen and why. It's a little bit of technical difficulties, but truly it's people that are the ones that solve the problems, and especially in India, I found. So I'm really honored to be with you. I've done a little bit of conversation with Khaki before, and I'd love to be back in India. So we could start the screen share now. And yeah, so we're going to talk today about how I relate to Mumbai as a writer, and the kind of the choices that I make as I'm doing my writing. And some of the things that I want to share with you are some true characters in important places in the 20s and earlier in Mumbai that appear in my books. And at the end, when we're going to have time for questions and comments, and I really want to know if there are any characters and buildings in the city that are really meaningful for you that I should think about. And also that, this general work that Khaki does, how does acknowledging and preserving a past that includes difficult things like colonialism affect us today? Please advance the slide. So while we're waiting for that, I'll just tell you a little bit more about me. You heard that I have sort of this mixed ethnic background, and my first trip to India. Okay, so we saw this slide.
What is this on, Susan?
Yeah, and it's great. I think a younger person came in and let them hear all this stuff too. So my first trip to India was in 1973. This is a picture of me as a 9-year-old. I'm at the Golconda Fort in Hyderabad. And this was the place where my where my father came home one day with a stack of Amar Chitra Kata comic books. And they had only been around for a couple of years. It was a new thing, the way to share history with children. And it was really wonderful. So that was part of my immersion. And I think I loved the world of history anyway. And those books and that trip to India really helped me. Next, please. So I'm going to just give you a little snapshot of what my books are and what these books are about. So the first book in the Perveen series is titled A Murder on Malabar Hill in India, and in other parts of the world, it's titled The Widows of Malabar Hill. And so it features a fictional character, Perveen Mistry, who I'm calling Bombay's first woman lawyer. And she's kind of a mashup between India's two earliest women lawyers, Cornelia Sarabji, who was a solicitor who began working in the 1890s and worked through the 30s, and Mitan Tata Lam, who began working as a barrister in the 1920s. And she didn't practice law for a very long time, but she did teach law at the government law college. And she also was this incredible activist for changing laws for women. And so these are, I won't go through every single thing in here. You can look at it as I'm talking, but this book it's a mystery, and it starts with an inheritance situation where Perveen is trying to assist some widows that are in a joint marriage situation to make sure that they get what they need. And unfortunately, it turns to murder. The next slide, please. So the Satapur Moonstone is the second book in the series, and this is the copy of what the cover looks like for the Indian edition. And this is a mystery that goes into the world of these princely states, that about 50% of the subcontinent was still being ruled by, Maharajas and Nawabs and landholders, but they had a very complicated relationship with the British government, where the British government was allowing them the rule, but they were actually really controlling them and trying to keep the powers from possibly rising up against them, such as the kind of things that happened during the East India Company days. So that was a fun book to write, and I used a lot of like looking at memoirs of real Maharanis to look at their lives and just sort of that kind of thing. The background of the British too, I also looked at during that time. Next slide. And then the Bombay Prince, which is the most current book. And this was set during Edward, Prince of Wales' arrival in November 1921 to Bombay. And it was a very exciting time. I'll go into a little bit more about where Gandhiji was at the moment and what was happening. And there's rioting going on, and there's also a big personal challenge for Perveen because she wants independence, but at this time, Parsi people were threatened. So she had to think about her own community and her own safety too. Next, please. So we're going to talk about real characters of the 1920s. And I don't know if anybody can recognize, unfortunately, I couldn't get the whole photo in, but this is the Tata family, who are so incredibly important in the history of India and especially Bombay. You know, not only was there the Tata Steel and the founding of Jamshedpur, but there was a lot of philanthropy in Bombay. There was the establishment of the Taj Hotel. There was the whole development of people staying by the seaside because the Tata family wanted to do that. Next slide, please. So this is Cornelia Sarabji. I told you that there was a mashup of two characters, and Cornelia had a really distinctive style of dress that she created for herself. She saw herself ethnically as a Parsi because her father was a Parsi. However, he converted to Christianity, and her mother was an Indian Christian woman. And the reason she was a Christian was she was an orphan who had been adopted by a British military couple as their daughter and raised as their daughter. So she, you know, I can kind of sympathize that she, like me, had a very complicated multi-ethnic background, and her parents were very supportive of her. She was, I believe, the first or among the first female students at the University of Bombay. She was the first woman to take and pass the Bachelor of Civil Law exam at Oxford. And so her status was the first female solicitor in the entire British Empire. Next, please. And so this lawyer, Mitan Tatalam, was 100% Parsi, and she is from Bombay, whereas Cornelia was from Pune. And so she had this feminist mother, this progressive father, that she was exposed to meeting this Indian suffragette, Sophia Dulip Singh, who visited from the United States. She has her own busy, interesting story. And what really struck me about her that I gained from her and her life is she chose to fight the the existing Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act, which was very restrictive when it came to reasons for divorce. Like, it was almost impossible to get a divorce, and certainly not because you had an emotional problem with somebody. So she managed to get the language changed for that. It wasn't like a perfect fix, but she managed to make things a lot better for people, but that didn't happen until the 1930s. Next, please. So Mahatma Gandhi, how can you have talk about 1920s Bombay without him? This was a time that he was really building strength. He had, you know, he'd come back from South Africa during the teen years, and he was settled in Bombay at a friend's house, which that'll be the next slide we look at. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is his dress changed during the 20s. He started out as this wearing Western clothes. And of course, he was a lawyer himself. And then he moved into a traditional dress like this. But by the end of, by 1922, he was very, he was wearing the quote unquote loincloth that he's known for wearing. He was only 51 years old at the time that I was writing, of the time that this book takes place, which is 1921. And they were huge freedom changes in the freedom movement, where many more people joined who were not just academic elites. And that all happened in the 1920s. Next slide, please. So this is where he was living, and he was staying at Mani Bhavan. Maybe a lot of people have visited there either with their school or on their own. It's still beautifully preserved, and it was a friend's home. And this is where he sat and he wrote his political articles. He had a number of publications, including Young India. That's the one where I've read a lot of his writing. And he began his activism here, and he wound up having his first fast here. And unfortunately, he was arrested in 1922. It was an arrest for sedition. And so this is the place where he was living when he was removed for that. Next slide, please. So I'm here at the Mani Bhavan with, on my right is the president, Usha Thakur, and on the left is her colleague, Sandhya Rao Mehta, and they wrote a book called Gandhi and Bombay Towards Swaraj, which was the first time that I had heard about these riots, these Prince of Wales riots, which happened in late 1921. Next, please. So this was the governor of Bombay at the time, Sir George Lloyd, a conservative, and he followed Lord Willingdon, who was actually a more popular governor than he was. This guy did not have that kind of he just didn't socialize the same way, let's put it that way. And also there was this trouble with the riots and the bad situation when the Prince of Wales came. So he was out by the end of 1921, which was, or actually, it says 23 here. So I may have a fact wrong on the exact time that he left. But his crowning glory was after India to eventually become the leader of the House of Lords. Next, please. Okay, Edward, Prince of Wales. I couldn't resist this photograph of him. And he was, when he came, he was a 27-year-old male. He was a bachelor, though he was dating a married woman. It wasn't Wallace Warfield Simpson. It was a Frida Dudley Ward. And I put dropout quotes around because they don't really say that in the history books, but he was briefly at Oxford. Then he was in France during World War I, and he had a very difficult 4-month tour of India. Next, please. And this is a shot of him arriving. When he arrived in November, he came through the gateway. They sort of inaugurated it, even though it wasn't quite finished. That's where he arrived, and there were stands set up all over the city for people to come and wave for him. And a lot of them were empty. There were places where they were, but a lot of them were not full. There was a very lavish party for him that night at Government House. And his arrival was the same day that Mahatma Gandhi called for a gathering of people to bring European clothes to burn in a bonfire in the mill area. So there was a political activism against European rule going on at the same time the same day that the prince arrived. And we can go to the next slide. And so this is a little bit of a headline of the kinds of things that happened during these riots that went on for 3 days. And the riot happened because people who were returning from the protests at the mills came up against people that had been celebrating the Prince of Wales, and they saw each other. And So fists began to fly, fires were set, buildings were smashed, and there was a general feeling that people who were Parsi or Anglo-Indian Christian were close to British, and so that they were an enemy. And the Hindus and Muslims actually, who were freedom-minded, actually united together. And of course, not everybody was fighting. And it's not like one side was the bad guy and one side was just a victim. There was fighting going on both ways. And in fact, it said that the police offered arms to, like lathis, to the Parsis to defend their area. So you could say, you know, it was a very mixed thing. Next, please. And so another fascinating couple is Muhammad Ali Jinnah and his wife Rati, who was who was born Parsi, the daughter of Lord Dinshaw Petit. And she eloped when she was 18 because Muhammad Ali Jinnah was her father's friend, and they were all, you know, Mr. Jinnah and Lord Petit, they were all interested in independence. So it was progressive, but they didn't expect, nobody expected Rati to fall in love with him. And she was a very strong-minded character. And unfortunately, she died on her 29th birthday. It was probably a suicide. Nobody knows for sure. And they appear in my books because they were such an interesting couple. And they also did go places during the week that during the time that the Prince of Wales was in Bombay. There was a luncheon at the Orient Club that these two attended. And I was excited to have that fact so I could place them in my book, The Bombay Prince. Next, please. Okay, and so I couldn't resist. This is a slide showing automobiles being delivered on horse-drawn cart. That's pretty difficult, I would think, for the cart, for the horses. And there were about 4,000 cars in the city in the early 1900s. And my character, Perveen, they have a Daimler. And they have a driver. And this is how she's able to get around in the 1920s. She's permitted to drive or to be driven places when she's doing her work as a lawyer. Next, please. This is a close-up of the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, which is the car that I have Perveen's friend, Alice Hobson Jones, in. And Alice Hobson Jones is Perveen's British friend who she met at Oxford, and she's progressive, independence-minded gay woman. And though, you know, it's the 1920s, so all of that is kind of stuffed down. And her father is a counselor for the governor of Bombay. So that means that they get these special privileges. Next. So we're going to talk about education in the city because that is one of the really big themes in my book, is that Perveen's education is really encouraged, and that was going on for a lot of people too. So next, please. So University of Bombay, here we have it. And this is a place that I was really interested in writing about. However, it's very, very difficult to get onto that historic campus. From probably a lot of people know what I'm talking about, and you know, it's guarded for security reasons. I have no idea what the conditions of the buildings are like. There's a clock tower on the convocation hall, and it has there's a very famous story about two Parsi girls in the Godrej family who fell to their deaths from there, and no one was ever apprehended for it. It's one of those stories that it filled my mind. It also filled the mind of my friend Nev March, who is a Parsi novelist living in the United States, who's from Mumbai. And so she was able to get in the clock tower, and she pulled it off in her book, and I highly recommend her book. Next, please. So Elphinstone College had a number of locations. It was first established by Kulla And then the one in Kalagota is the one that I write about in my book. And the reason that I included Elphinstone is it was the original home of the Government Law College, which was then called Government Law School. And it was also a place where they had classes, the first classes of the Sir J.J. School of the Arts. Next. So when you think about where do you want to work, like for a writer, if you want to be able to do scenes well, you need to be able to walk around a place. And I'm very grateful that Wilson College was as accessible to me as it has been for a number of movies. Practically every film I see with a college scene in Mumbai is set at Wilson College. I recognize it. And it has an interesting history that there were always girl students allowed. And in general, in Bombay area, there were more co-ed schools than single-sex schools. Calcutta was really different. There was a lot of sex-segregated education. And another cool thing about Wilson College is it's on, you know where it is on Marine Drive. It's up, then it was called Kennedy Seaface Road. And that was where the Prince paraded by. So you could see that the wheels are turning for me. The college students are obviously going to have to watch this parade. Do they all want to watch the Prince of Wales? No. Next. So this is a picture of the students and faculty at outside McKitchen Hall, which is like a dormitory building. And you will see that there are women in that group. Next, please. And this is a picture of the faculty, and you'll see there's quite a number of Parsi names within this group. You'll see that there is, there's one woman in the group. So they were, and this is from the 20s or earlier. So this is that I took this picture when I was doing my research in their archive. So you could see that they had the challenge of a mixed gender faculty. Next. And then this is a gallery at Wilson College. And when I looked at this gallery, I saw the the railings, and I thought, wow, I wonder if anyone could go over that railing. Okay, next, please. So, and then the other thing that I really liked about my research at Wilson College is I saw that they have this chapel building. It was founded as a missionary college. And as I did the reading about what happened, there were some political protest articles in student magazines. And one of the challenges was chapel was not a mandatory class. So you didn't have to go to chapel, say you were a different religion than Christianity. However, roll call was taken right after chapel. So if you weren't there, you were marked absent. So that's a way of pressuring people to go to chapel. Okay, next. So the High Court's an important building. We're kind of moving on to places. And because women were not allowed to argue a case before a judge in a courtroom, they could only do the solicitor work without appearing in court, without speaking in court, I should put it. Perveen's relationship with the High Court is complicated, and she has not been able to do the work she would like to do there. And I love the architecture of this building so much. I've been through it, and I've heard it said that the gargoyles represent this temptations of the outside world. And there's so many interesting little creatures around the building. And so I love to look at this building and many others in Mumbai. Next. And this is the Gateway of India. It was not finished at the time of my book, but Prince Edward did arrive through it. I was able to see on a film from the time. And it was an expensive, long-ranging building project, and that made it perfect for my novel. I have Perveen's brother Rustam working as a subcontractor on that project. And honestly, if something was going on for 13 years, I think there's a good chance that there were many people that were hired and fired. So that's why I say that the Mistry family was involved in building Gateway of India. Next. So Taj Mahal Palace, I took this picture myself, and it was incredible mixture of architectural styles. As I mentioned before, it's Jamsetji's Tata's baby, and opened in 1903, and it was a real challenge to Watson's Hotel, which was European only. Next slide, please. And this is the street side entrance. So you can see all these fantastic cars pulling up. And this really reminds me of some scenes in my books when Perveen comes there, when she's brought there by her chauffeur. And one of the things was that you could have a hotel that was so lavish and not European owned and open to anyone who could pay the room charge, which started at 6 rupees. Next, please. Inside, here's the desk, the reception desk. And there were a lot of Europeans working there, as well as Anglo-Indians and Indians that had their first electric lift in the city, which you can still see. And one thing I found interesting in my cross research, when I was looking at things in the Royal Bombay Yacht Club, they were really angry when the Taj would have events the same night that they were having their dinners and their dances, because people would rather go to the Taj sometimes than to the yacht club. And also the cost of the rooms were nicer at the Taj, and that they were sometimes very competitive in price. Okay, so next, please. And this is the dining room. The Taj didn't have like bars at the time that this novel was taking place in the 1920s, though you could certainly get alcohol here. And there was an outside area too. But look at that vast dining room with all the fans. Next. And this is a picture I took of the cantilevered stairway. And this atrium design was, you know, obviously to get air, to keep it cool, and also having windows on the seaside in the guest room, which was an innovation at the time, to sort of put everything towards the front facing the back of the hotel, which was the sea. That also kept things cool. And this is inspiring, as you'll see in the next slide. Next. So that stairway, you can see this is the US edition of the Bombay Prince, and you'll see some guys are fighting up there in the corner. And when I look at that stairway, I think, oh, that would be a scary place to fall off. So I put it as a place for a fight. It inspired, the stairway literally inspired a scene in the book. Next. And then this is the Daobaji Lad City Museum of Mumbai, which it's the city's first museum. And the reason that I like this museum so much, and I come here almost every time I'm in Mumbai, is because I like to look at the little models inside. There are all these little clay models of different people in Western India in their traditional dress. And it was all done in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So I'm able to envision the people of the time and how they dressed better. So that's one of the really great things for me there. Next. And then I do a lot of mentions of hospitals, because normally if there's a crime, somebody's going to get hurt, right? And sometimes it's Perveen, sometimes it's somebody else. And Sir JJ was a very important hospital. It was founded really in conjunction with the medical school, so that Indians could go to medical school and have a highly advanced knowledge and have more treatment for everybody. So one of the themes is a lot of buildings that are named after people are named after departing governors. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, so here we have Kama Hospital, which was created, and it was it was an Indian founded hospital meant to serve women and children. And the idea, Mr. Kama's idea, was to have an all-female staff. However, that never came to fruition. It was really difficult for women to get hired as doctors there. And Jerusha Jarad was the first woman obstetrician in Bombay. She's from the Bene Israel community, and she was turned down there when she initially wanted to work there. She had to go to Bangalore to work, and eventually she came back and got a job there. Next, please. Okay, and this is another example of an interesting hospital. This is a lying-in hospital meant for Parsi women who've given birth, who need to stay with their babies away from their homes for 44 days for reasons, you know, there were religious reasons for it, for ideas of just purity. And a hospital like this that was airy and bright was better for the health. And they also were cared for by nurses. And, you know, something interesting that I found is that in my research is that it also protects the woman's body not to be, you know, have any kind of marital complications, duties for those 44 days. It sort of allows for healing. And right now it is no longer taking patients staying there because there's been such a decline in people believing that they need to go and stay for 44 days in a hospital after giving birth. And it is being used for the Parsiana, which has a typo there, magazine, and also other offices. Next. And here's another hospital that I visited in my work, and it appears in A Murder on Malabar Hill. This is the Parsi General Hospital, which is free care, and it's a beautiful building. Next, please. And here's a hospital that has a Hindu history. A philanthropist, physician founded it. And this is, I found this because it was right across the street from Gamdevi police station, which I needed to look at for, you know, one of my books. And I was happy to see this place there. And it's a very handsome looking hospital with an interior courtyard. Next, please. And we're out of the hospitals, we're onto another important institution that pretty much everyone, I'm sure, across India would recognize, the steps and the facade of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. And it was built as a town hall with this literary and scholarly society sharing it. And there were these Royal Asiatic Societies that of Britain and Ireland, sort of that's where it all began, but they wanted to preserve relics and scholarly materials in a number of Asian countries. So you can see that they have locations outside of India that I've listed here, some of the places that there will be an Asiatic Society and collection. And we can go to the next slide. And then here's what a reading room looks like when I was visiting there recently. And I love that they have the old furniture there. That makes it feel really special. And the next slide. So this is a refurbished lecture hall in the Asiatic Society building. It had beautiful new wallpaper that was a replica of the old wallpaper that was there, and all this old furniture, and all the chairs were recaned. It was really impressive. Next, please. And this is the first structure of the Royal Bombay Yacht Club. So this is an exclusive club that was founded in the 1870s by Europeans in Bombay that had an interest in sailing. And it's it's significant that when they got their lease, they assured the Bombay Port Trust that natives were going to be able to be members. However, the only Indians that they admitted during the colonial period were the Sassoons. So a couple, Lord and Lady Sassoon, who were very wealthy, and of course they're Baghdadi Jews. So that's what the foundation was like for that. And that building appears in the book I'm writing right now, and Perveen has an encounter talking to people at the yacht club. Next, please. And then this is the Chambers, which it's a great building that they built in the late 19th century for people to stay. I've stayed there. I have a family member who has a membership, and apparently its opening led to the decline of the Baikula Club, which also had rooms, but it wasn't in an area that was as fashionable as Kolaba. Next, please. And then these are two of the gentlemen that work at the yacht club. They are brothers. You might be able to guess by looking at them. And the thing about staying in a club is you get to talk to people and know people and feel at home. And when I first had my first stay at the yacht club was probably like 2010. And I saw so many Indians there that I had no idea that it was a British only club. I couldn't even imagine it. Yes, the menu was a mix of foods, including some sort of historic British type foods, but I couldn't understand it. So I realized, oh, I can never have Perveen go into the yacht club, even though I would love to include it, but I can't. I have to reflect the times and say what it was like. Next slide, please. So the Ripon Club was another exclusive club. This was a club where membership was Parsi only, and at the time it was male Parsi only, and a lot of the people who belonged to the Ripon Club tended to be in the legal field or accounting. And so that's a beautiful screen behind my friend Mehrnaz Wadia, who brought me in there. And I can only visit there with a guest. And next slide, please. And okay. And I wonder if anybody knows who this is. The editor of Parsiana magazine, Jehangir Patel, and he brought me there for lunch on my last trip. And you can see people enjoying that beautifully lit room. Next, please. And this is such a big space that I wondered if it was ever used for balls, because I thought it would be really fun to have a ball in this place. And it turns out that it was. So there will be a ball at the Ripon Club in my fourth book. Next, please. Okay, I just really, really love this piece of furniture. This is a bench that you can sit on so you can watch people playing cards, and you could actually see what their hand of cards was. But you'd be a spectator, so you wouldn't say anything. Now, this is a piece of furniture. I don't believe there is anything like this in the United States. And it's just a tremendous, it's a tremendous bench. And I'm going to work it into my next book. Next, please. And I want to talk about Parsi colonies. I hope I'm not going too slow. Parsi colonies were established so that Parsis could live there regardless of income. They would have a comfortable place to live. And so there are many Parsi colonies all over the city. And this is an older one, and it's in South Mumbai. It's called Dadiset Residence. And we can go to the next one. And this is Mehrnaz again, who is one of my Parsi friends, and she with her daughter, and she brought me there so I could visit with some people in the older generation and see this lovely colony. Next, please. And then we're going to, of course, Dadar Parsi colony is where Perveen Mistry lives because her family is affluent. Her brother Rustam was involved in building this colony. The building of it started in the late teens and went into the early 1920s. And one thing that's significant about it is it doesn't have a wall like some colonies or many colonies have a wall around them, but this really was a very free-flowing place, and there were they planted lots and lots of trees. Next. So this is my friend Perveen Patel. She writes a blog called Bhavi Bride, which is about Parsi cooking. And when she was living in Dadar, but not in Dadar Parsi colony, but nearby, she took me around and she has helped me a lot with the food details in my books. Next, please. So this is a map of the colony that you could see when you were there. Next, please. And then this is a house that's so beautiful. This is a Parsi colony house. All right, and next, please. Here's another one that I took a picture of this. So you're seeing this early 20th century architectural style with these very comfortable verandas. Next, please. This is a pretty yellow house, and it kind of makes me think about the duplex I created for Perveen. Perveen's father is on one side, and she lives there with the father and mother, and her brother is on the other side, and he's there with his wife, Gulnaz. Next, please. Okay, and this is a very brief detour to Mataran because book 2 is set in this Satapur, and Satapur is modeled on Mataran. And I had a wonderful visit there during sort of still rainy season. That's why it looks misty like that. Next, please. And then I stayed at this place called the Bar House that it is a hotel. It was built as a leisure resort, and it inspired the circuit house that I mentioned Colin Sandringham living in the Satapur Moonstone. Next, please. And then Malabar Hill is an important setting in my books because Alice's family lives there. And it's also where the Farid household is in the very first book, A Murder on Malabar Hill. And so these are the hanging gardens. And sometimes Perveen and her friend Alice go there to walk when they want to talk privately. And it was built in 1881. Next, please. And so this house is interesting to me. Mehrangir, this was the Homi Bhabha home. And this is the inspiration for Alice Hobson Jones family's bungalow, which they are renting in Malabar Hill. And I found it online, and so I wanted to write about it. And I learned sort of right after I was starting to write about it that it had been bought by a Godrej family member. And then I just learned the other day that it actually was torn down to make a multi-story building. So next, please. And then this is the government house, which people call Raj Bhavan, and it's, in the hands of the Indian government, and it's this huge, huge acreage, I think 50 hectares. Only Indian citizens can visit there. So I can never get in there, and I would love to, but I can't. Next, please. And then the Jinnah bungalow, I was able to actually see this before some walls went up. I've only seen it once. It's in Malabar Hill. It was actually built in 1936. And you can sort of look at that and say, yeah, that doesn't look like a 20s building, but it sort of set my mind on fire when I was thinking about the Farid bungalow. Next, please. And then this is my favorite bungalow in all of Mumbai so far that I've seen. It's near Joggers Park in Bandra. And from the nameplate, I can tell that it's a Christian-owned house. And it looks to me like it has Moorish, Islamic, and Edwardian styles all put together. And the screens, the decorative screens that appear to be brass are absolutely stunning. Next, please. So how do I learn more? Like I've mentioned that I like to look at things and I take pictures and I get inspired, but I also have to talk to a lot of people. So these are some of the people who have helped me through the course of the series, and I'm sharing their names here in case you ever are looking, you want to learn more about the history of the police. Deepak Rao is a police historian. You want to learn more, there's some publications like Parsi has a lot of history. And then Bombay Wala is a wonderful Instagram resource for pictures of historic Bombay. Parsiana, of course, has tremendous articles. You can get a membership for that. And then this is a historian, Dinyar Patel, who I think has spoken for Khaki before. He's an expert on the independence movement, especially with relation to Dadabhai Nauroji and the riots. He wrote a really important article about the Parsi and the Prince of Wales riots. So I used that. Next, please. So I think that I'm going to summarize now that there are these challenges about revealing history in the past for me. And I noticed that some places are well preserved and known, like say the Asiatic, it's accessible and it's part of the landscape. But then there are other places that are privately owned that it's much easier for them to disappear, such as that Homi Baba house we were talking about. And then I always ask myself, do the buildings of the colonial period have a merit that allows them to stay? Because sometimes people say, well, there was something before that. It doesn't matter. And is maintaining an old building any better than keeping a statue of a colonial oppressor? And sharing my own experience, I live in the United States. I live in a city where there was slavery. I live in a country where there was slavery. And what happened over the last few years is monuments were removed that had been put up by white supremacists in the late 19th, early 20th century. The monuments were removed, but the buildings are there. Like, for example, I went to Johns Hopkins University. That was built on land that was a plantation that enslaved Black people. When you're walking on that campus, there are plaques that say, this is where the slave house was. Just like there's a plaque that says, this is an old privy. Like they still have an 1890s outdoor toilet building, not usable. It's like it's made out of limestone or something. And they say who used it and whatnot. So I think it's great when you can do that. Next slide, please. So we've come to the questions and comments, and some of the things that I'm eager to hear are just whatever you're thinking about. But from you, what are the troubles of the 20s that are still present in our lives? And what parts of history are worth preserving that are being ignored that you care about? And how does the idea of colonial history affect you? And, some of your favorite historic people and places. So I thank you for sticking with me this long, and I'm eager to hear what you might have to say.
Thank you, Sujata. Thanks so much. That was a really interesting tour around Perveen's worlds. And as I've read many of your books, I know you really bring these places alive. So thank you very much for that. I'm just going to get to some of the questions. Okay, the first one was, given that you are a mix of a Bengali and German heritage, how did you choose a Parsi heroine for your novels?
Yeah, it would have been easier, wouldn't it, if I had gone into like a Hindu heritage, because that's where my family members are. coming from. However, the reality was that the early women lawyers were Parsi or Christian. And I felt that to say it was somebody coming from a Hindu household would not have been honest and sort of respected this community that had taken this risk of saying, we are going to allow our daughter to go get an advanced degree with men in the classroom, and we're going to allow her to work in a situation where there are men, and we might not be in the room. She'll be there, but we are going to allow this because we think that this is progress, and we think women should be able to do this. So it's like, that's why I did it. And it is harder because I have to do, this stuff isn't in my heart. It's not like I grew up, praying with a kusti. I have to learn about that from Parsi people that I know, and along the journey, I've made friends. So that's been really good. Parsi friends here in the United States and in India.
Thank you. I think someone just wanted to clarify the name of the comics, and somebody said it was Amar Chitra Katha, and they are still being published. Okay, there was one which says in Wilson College, the staff photo is labeled local faculty. Was there also separately European or foreign faculty?
Yes, very good. That's a good detailing. That's a good catch. Yes, and in some of the pictures I've seen like that they're sitting in the front and other people are in different places. So in the scene I have during the viewing, I have the Europeans sitting together.
Okay. Another person asks, how long on average does it take you to research a book?
Well, I research at the same time I'm writing. So I probably do maybe 2 months before I start writing the book. But then when I'm writing the book, I'm reading the whole time, and I am sending questions to some of my experts. One of my favorite experts, who I did not put in the list because she is in the United States, is a professor of the history of law named Mitra Sharafi, who's an expert on the colonial period, especially Parsi involvement in law. So I tend to show her what I'm thinking about and ask her, do you think it's likely that Perveen could have argued this case in this courtroom? And so, for example, in one of my books, she speaks in a court, the coroner's court. The coroner is not a judge. So we figured I could get away with trying that, and that wouldn't actually have been breaking the law. It might have happened, but then she cannot speak in another situation. So that's the kind of research that I do as an ongoing basis as situations arise in my writing.
Okay, interesting. Someone just pointed out that I think the Yacht Club Chambers building was actually the BCCI headquarters. So maybe that, I don't.
Oh dear. Like I put in the wrong, I thought I got it from the back, but
Okay.
I defer if I've got the wrong.
Somebody was also saying that, do you get readers who question or correct your historical content given it's fictional writing?
Yeah. I think that we strive to be as accurate as we can and fact check, but there always are things that are a mistake, like for example, calling a ship a destroyer when it should have been, there was another name for it, which was something that recently came up that I was fortunately able to send to my publisher, so it'll be corrected in a later edition.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's okay to send me things that you think are wrong. It's definitely okay. I'd rather have it be as truthful as possible.
That's very magnanimous of you. Okay, and I have a last question which says that somebody's curious to know why buildings shown as bungalows are called bungalows when they're actually multi-storied, and is there a difference in that definition? Would you know?
I have a book about Indian bungalows, and I think that I think it can be more than one story. In the United States, a bungalow definitely can be more than one story.
Okay.
But that's another one that it's like, I don't want to be, I would defer to an architectural historian to answer that question. And I think that very commonly when I've been in India and people have talked about a home being a bungalow, there is more than one story. I mean, it's my experience as a guest to have heard that, but it might not be correct.
Hmm.
Okay, somebody says there's a British definition. There's something in the chat about it.
I'm just gonna, something has just come through. But
Okay.
before that, somebody said that, they find historical fiction a really important way to illuminate history, and thank you for the books. Somebody else who works at the University of Mumbai said that they found the mystery of the death due to the fall from the Rajabai Tower of the two women from the Godrej family that you spoke about. Really interesting. She didn't know that. There was a lot of first women doctors and scientists in India, probably had very fascinating lives. And those are some historical individuals that would be interesting to hear about. And somebody else says, fab books, love them, thank you. So I think I would echo those. The books are really fun to read. And I think I've read 3 and waiting for the 4th one now. So yeah, if there are any more questions, if you could please put them in the chat box quickly. Okay, or I think yeah. I think the old Mumbai group on Facebook would like your groups. Yes, it's a good idea to post it there. Somebody's a member of the group, we can post it there. Have you given up on Ray or Rai? I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Ray, yeah. So I wrote a series before this, and I spent at least maybe 15 years writing that series. And it's set in modern Japan. And I feel like I would be interested in writing something shorter about her now. But right now I'm so consumed with the historical fiction. Like you can probably see in the back of my study, like all these boxes, like up on my cupboard. And those boxes, like each box is like research and papers relating to some facet of Perveen Mistry. And so I just can't do it right now. It's like this is my priority is the Perveen series right now.
And when is the next book out? Somebody wants.
Yeah, I can tell you a little about that. That should be out in May of 2023, May or June, spring. I think it's May. And this is a mystery that deals with the world of reproductive rights, reproductive medicine. And so I do have a woman doctor in it. There was a good comment from Ayushi about the first women doctors. So we have somebody like that in this. And we learn, I learned a lot about in really difficult situations for women. And also you think about what was it like before birth control and how did people try to manage their lives and why were there so many children and it was so hard for people. So all of that, it gets entangled in a legal case, of course.
Yeah, that really sounds fascinating, especially with stuff that's going on even in America now with reproductive rights. One more question quickly. Is Parveen's relationship with her English boyfriend going to develop?
Yes, it's going to be developed. I can't tell you which way it will go. Now, one thing that has helped me in my decision-making about what kind of relationship can I have for a woman that's in a weird situation, because Perveen is separated, she's not divorced, is I looked at Cornelia Sarabji's life and she never married. So she was able to have this incredible career. Mitan Tata Lam married. She stopped going to the courtroom or she continued doing things, but she did them differently. She was not doing the same kind of work. And so I like the situation that Perveen has. And I know that people had these covert relationships. And especially the Europeans were more likely, if they were going to have a relationship with an Indian woman, it was more likely to be somebody that was Parsi than was Hindu or Muslim, for sort of those reasons about personal freedom.
And Farooq has a question about, is your character is the character based on any real life woman doctor in your next book?
She's inspired by Dr. Jerusha Girard, who is Bombay's first obstetrician, a member of the B'nai Israel community. And I was really happy that a Jewish B'nai Israel historian in Mumbai, Sifra Lenton, has helped me with developing this character and learning more about Jerusha's life.
Okay, and I think that is all the questions. Oh, sorry, one more. Would the Perveen series be set in other places in India in the future, do you think?
I don't know. I kind of would enjoy that, going to a place that I'd like to go to that had a historical big importance. There are a number of Delivalas that want me to set it there because, of course, that was the center of government and everything. But I tend to think about, I'd like to go to Kerala and sit in a little bungalow and write for a couple of months there while it rains. So, that sort of is like where my heart would be. And of course, it wasn't Kerala then, it was Trivandrum or Travancore. And so I'd have to reimagine it, but maybe
Yeah,
so.
So Lisa said that Kerala would be fab and she would love to see something set in South India or maybe even Oxford. Any plans to do a web series? That's about the Perveen novels?
Well, I definitely have things percolating and investigating. Nothing has come together yet, but I'm hopeful that something will come together. It's a matter of finding a really good team that understands the stories and understands it's a feminist mystery series. It's a legal series, that we honor these cultures. We respect everybody's faith in these stories. And, so it's a matter of finding the storytellers and things like that. But I think it'll happen sooner or later. And if it takes a long while, that's okay, because I can just keep writing.
Yeah, it'd be a fab web series, especially the clothes.
Oh yeah, the clothes and the interiors. I mean, the whole thing, you couldn't pull it off in another country. It would have to be done in India.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's all the time we have for, and that's all the questions that we've got. Thank you again, Sujata, very, very much for your early rise and taking this time out for us. And and we look forward to next May for your new book.
Yeah, thank you very much, Perveena. And thank you, Khusro, for masterminding all of this together, and also to everybody who came on their evening. You must be hungry for your dinners. So I hope you have a nice Saturday night.